listening to the PT Pintcast, where smart people in healthcare come to make noise. Here's your host, Jimmy McKay.
Thanks, voiceover guy. First, thanks to US Physical Therapy. They were nice enough to host me at CSM. I got to hang out at their booth and do some live streams. If you've built something special, but scaling your clinic and planning for what's next, well, that can feel overwhelming. At US Physical Therapy, they partner with clinic owners who want to grow with you without you having to give up your identity. You stay in control. They bring the support. Learn how at usphpartnership.com. That's usphpartnership.com. Their website, USPH. Today, our guest believes physical therapy doesn't have a value problem. It has a positioning problem. I like this. He spends his time helping independent practices stop waiting for reimbursement to improve and start rethinking how they get paid altogether. While most clinic owners are stuck negotiating contracts, chasing referrals, or hoping legislation fixes their margins. Spoiler alert, it's not going to do that. He's asking different questions. What if the problem isn't reimbursement? What if the problem is the model? What if the call is coming from inside the house? You get the idea. He's gotten to work with practices that want more control over their pricing, their relationships, and their future by building direct relationships with employers and positioning physical therapy as the first stop for musculoskeletal care. He's here to challenge the default system and give clinic owners in the audience a chance to think differently about power in healthcare. Let's bring him in, Matthew Pratte. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Jimmy, thank you for having me on.
Pretty good intro, right? I've been like, I tried to go like NPR style.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to have a hard time living up to that, but that was really good. Thank you.
All right. So I like bold statements. And you say most PT practices don't actually have a reimbursement problem. They've got a business model problem. I like that because it changes the ownership on not our fault to it might not be our fault, but it is our problem. So break that idea down for me.
Yeah. Well, let me start by first saying reimbursement is an issue for a lot of practices. I'm not minimizing that in any way. The reason I say that the way that I do is because the current traditional fee-for-service system does not position physical therapy, for the most part, in a position to win. Where your people come from, how much you get paid, your referrals, all of that is dictated by someone else. We're hoping legislation will change that. We're hoping, referral partnerships will change that. We're hoping that the hospital system won't go out and acquire our competitor across the street and just refer everything in-house. And so when you look at the reality of the healthcare costs in America continue to rise, right? I saw a post this morning by Dr. Eric Bricker, and in his post, he talked about how for a family of 5, the cost of healthcare in the Dallas-Fort Worth area was $35,000 in a year, which is insane. Like, and that's my situation. I have a family of 5. I'm married. I've got 3 little girls, and that's a lot of money, right? And so as these costs continue to rise, the people who are paying for care, patients and the people that employ them, they're looking for alternative methods to be able to bring those costs down, right? And so for physical therapy, I think that there's this unique opportunity to position not as a cheaper than option, right? As in, outcomes are worse, but you save money. But in the reality of this does save you $2,700 on average per musculoskeletal claim for these employers. And employers are willing to pay a premium for that. So to me, when I look at it, the positioning problem is that the value that PT provides isn't being realized or recognized by the current system. So we need to look at alternative methods to go outside of, okay, who does value physical therapy and who's willing to pay what physical therapy is worth? Because I believe, $150 reimbursement across the nation should be average. But I know a lot of practices I've talked to, sometimes they're getting $50, sometimes they're getting $75. So that's why I say there's a positioning problem.
Right. It sort of changed. This part of the conversation feels like that Spider-Man meme, right? Is everybody sort of pointing at each other saying it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. It sort of shifts it shifts that ownership. I mean, I heard Jerry Durham say this a long time ago, which the fact that we still call it reimbursement and not getting paid. Like, I don't reimburse my plumber. I pay him. Like, I might get the invoice a day later, but I still pay him. Isn't that funny how we even just the words that we use, like reimbursement, it's like, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Appreciate you allowing me to take your money for doing the thing I did.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what specifically breaks in the traditional fee-for-service model for independent practices? Where do things break down?
I think that a lot of it goes back to control, and like control in the sense of, in the traditional fee-for-service model, the way that things are set up right now, independent, outpatient practices, they don't have the opportunity to dictate who do they treat, when do they treat, right? Obviously, with greater direct access laws, some of that has opened up to a point, but I know certain states it's still, there's caps on how many visits people can get on direct access. And so from the problem, I would say, with the current traditional fee-for-service model is it's not built to value physical therapy and for physical therapy practices to win, right? The people that are winning right now are the health systems. The people that are winning are the people who have the scale to go and negotiate reimbursements, right? And I've even had this conversation with some people who, agree and disagree with what I'm saying. And that's great. I think that's the discourse that we need, right? That's how the industry, that's how healthcare gets pushed forward. That's, we have these conversations. But when your practice is located in a large metropolitan area, you have the demographics and the wealth to say, oh, I offer cash pay. I offer these other wellness services. And so, and I can scale to the point where now I can negotiate my contracts and get meaningful change in my reimbursement. But what does the small rural pediatric practice who services mainly Medicare patients, what do they do, right? They're forced to say, well, I have to take what I can get from insurance, and that is what it is, right? And so, and I, even in that conversation, I've had, people have told me, well, they decided to do that. That's their problem, right? I'm like, I understand, but I think we all would agree greater access to care is good. Like, we want people getting into the care that they need. So we've got to find a way that it at least works for the vast majority of people. And I'm not in any way advocating that we should just trash the traditional fee for service model. I don't, that's not what I think would be most beneficial, especially for most practices. But I do think that we're kind of getting to an inflection point where the cost of providing care, inflation, rising overhead, staffing, how much it costs to, pay your staff. People are coming out of PT school with, I think, you can correct me, Jimmy, I'm not sure. I think the average is like 150,000 in student loans is what people are coming out of PT school. So people with that much debt, they can't come in and start at 60K, right? Like, they've got to make more money than that, right?
Yeah.
And we're getting to this point where it's getting incredibly hard for, we'll call them the mom and pop private practices to operate, right?
Yeah.
Margins are getting so thin, they can't eat the cost. Larger practices can. And for me, like, just my background, and I think, just uniquely to my experience, what I've been able to see, I've spent a lot of time emailing, cold calling practices all across the country. Like, some people who listen to this, you may even have a voicemail in your inbox from me at this very moment.
Great.
But in the month of January alone, I talked to 2 6-location practices. I'm obviously not going to name names or locations. Talked to 2 owners who told me in January 2 6-location practices that they were selling. And I've seen that as a growing trend over the last 6 months. And I think we're getting to that point where the economics don't make sense.
Math doesn't math.
The math doesn't math. And the concern that I have, my background, I played football from 5th grade into college. I've been on a lot of treatment tables. I've got a very good friend who's a physical therapist here where I live. I deeply care about the industry and about physical therapy. And my concern is that in 5 years, the PT student coming out and saying, I want to go start my own practice because I just want to treat and serve my community, and maybe we scale it in the future,
Right.
They're not going to be able to do that. Their only option is
Right.
going to be, I've got to go work for this very large company, and
Yeah.
we're only going to have 4 or 5 of those. Maybe
Yeah.
that's my concern.
That's what I mean. That's what I've been hearing, and that's what some of the smart people that I hang out with, which is you can do this as an individual provider. Like this is where, like they said, the rise of the 1.5 FTE location, right? It's like you running
Yeah.
it, you bring someone on part-time, but when you go
Yeah.
to a step bigger than that, that next step doesn't make any sense. The other end of the
Yeah.
spectrum is a giant multi-state chain or a hospital system, or you sort of do what Danny Mattei and his group talk about, which is like it's just cash. But will that work everywhere? Maybe not,
No.
right? Like
Yeah.
so the question I always ask people is like, what game are you playing? What game do you think you're playing? I heard someone say it on a podcast recently. Just somebody was saying, "Oh my God, I'm just done with this corporate America. I'm just going to go open a coffee shop." And the guy was probing, and he goes, "Well, do you like spreadsheets and ordering coffee and cups and lids and napkins?" And they're like, "No, I want to hang out and talk and hand coffee over." He goes, "You want to be a barista?
Yep.
That's what a barista does." So a coffee shop owner does that 1% of the time. So
Yeah.
I think when people are like, I'm frustrated by doing whatever this is, either a clinician or an owner, understand what game you're actually playing. Because right now for owners, it sounds like margin compression, referral dependency, or I've said this before, you need to be a marketing engine first that happens to sell physical therapy.
Yeah.
Red Bull is a marketing company that happens to sell an energy drink, not the other way around. And then,
Right.
we've heard just in the last couple of weeks, clinicians saying, I signed on to that contract knowing I'm losing money every visit. I'm like, how do you do that with a straight face? Like, how do you do that with a straight face? So overall, we can say, you've said PT needs better positioning. What does that look like to you in a practice?
Yeah, I think the 2 ways that come to mind, you mentioned it a second ago, right? There's cash based, and I think that should be a mix of every practice's payer mix is just cash based patients. I think the hard part with that is I've and I could be completely wrong on this, but I haven't seen many practices that are cash based be able to scale really well. And I think part of the problem with that is you're very demographic dependent, right? But just like the example I provided earlier. I mean, I grew up in a pretty rural area, blue collar family. We would have never had the money to pay
Right.
to go to physical therapy cash based. Never would have had the money. And so I think that's where the cash pay, you get into, well, what are direct access laws? Does this work in every demographic? It can to some extent, right? But I don't think it's the solution, in my opinion, where I think the biggest opportunity for physical therapy and for physical therapy practices is in the direct contracting model with employers. And I'll tell you why I think that's the case. It alleviates some of the problems that we just talked about, right? Like, oh, this is a rural area. These people don't have a lot of money. They can't afford to pay me cash pay, right? But I also I'm not really happy with the contracted insurance rate, right? That I'm usually getting in the same area. When you contract directly with a self-insured employer, and Jim, are you familiar, Jimmy, with like what a self-insured employer is?
Yeah, but just explain
Okay.
again, because I don't know if everybody
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. So basically, when an employer is self-insured, they have their own group health plan. And instead of paying premiums to Blue Cross Blue Shield, UHC, they have a third party administrator that can be someone like Blue Cross or UHC. But instead of paying for premiums, they're just paying all of the claims out of pocket. So for their covered lives, right? So anyone who's an employee and then a dependent on their plan, they pay all of the healthcare costs for those people, right? And what that means is when my wife pulls her back at the gym, and then she has to go to the PCP, and then the PCP says, "Yeah, I don't really get musculoskeletal. Let me refer you to a specialist." And then you go to the specialist, and you might get a great specialist who's like, "Oh yeah, this sounds more like a PT problem. Let's get you into PT." right? My experience, having gone through this before, they're going to want to do imaging. And then once you get imaging, they're either going to say, let's do surgery or pain management or maybe PT, right? But
Right.
I think it's pretty rare that they get pushed directly into PT, right? All of those stops along the way, it just inflates the costs. And these self-insured employers who are paying every cost along the way, every PCP visit, every specialist visit, they're looking at this rising cost of healthcare and going, how do I make this work? Right? Like I only have so much budget that I can put towards this. And then how do I make it work? So they are willing, these self-insured employers, and the majority of employers in America are actually self-insured. And what we've been seeing in our conversations at like Second Door Health is basically more and more employers, even smaller and smaller employers, because the premiums are getting so expensive, they're looking to go self-insured. It just costs too much.
It's a gamble, but now
Right.
there's skin in the game. So now you're advocating for better decisions, and you're like, well, if this on average, because everything's an average, right?
Yep.
This on average tends to lead to lower costs and better outcomes, getting that person back to work, covering them, right? Giving them care, back to work,
Yeah.
solving the problem, and it's less money. Well, I'm going to want to do that. I'm incentivized to do that. Whereas the insurance company, you have paid them. Now they are now practicing medicine without a license, essentially, where they will deny or use strategies to pay as little as possible. It's just, it's moving where the money is, it's moving where the decisions are made.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason why I think this is I think it needs to be a very important model for the future of physical therapy, and especially private outpatient physical therapy, is, these employers, they're not looking to pay you less than your current contracted rate with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Most of the time when we've had these conversations with employers, they're willing to pay above and beyond a per visit rate of what you're getting right now. The reason being, you're saving them on average $2,700 per claim for musculoskeletal care, right? So they're looking at that and they go, well, if I had 200 claims last year, that's $540,000 potentially in savings.
I like that math.
That's yeah, right. They like that math too. And the reason and all that being said, like this model, it's not easy. It takes time. It takes time developing the relationships, the conversations, and it's new, right? Anytime you're trying to introduce a new business model, a new product, it takes time. But the reason I think that it needs to be a part of the future of physical therapy is, one, margins are an issue. This is a great way to solve margin problems, right? And when you have those direct contracts, you can set that up as on-site services, or you can just have people fed right into your clinic, right? If you want to go on site and you've got the infrastructure for that, you can do that. If not, you can just have people funneled straight into your clinic, most likely for a higher reimbursement than what anyone else is paying you at the moment. And it solves the problem we talked about earlier with like the cash pay or the cash-based model, because even in rural communities, your municipalities, your school districts, your fire departments, your police departments, those are all generally self-insured. So no matter where you're located, you have people that you can go out and contract with and be able to fulfill this type of model.
We'll get to misconceptions in a minute. I want to say thanks to Empower EMR, one of the organizations supporting the show. If your clinic is stuck on an EMR that slows you down, that's a choice you made. You don't have to do that forever. Empower gives you speed, clean workflows, and features PTs actually asked for. Better notes, faster documentation, smoother operations, all wrapped in customer support that just doesn't ghost you. Upgrade your clinic's brain with Empower EMR at empoweremr.com. Misconceptions. So with direct to employer, there's some misconceptions, I bet, that PTs have about it. You just touched on it a second ago. I'm too small. I don't know how to sell. That's only for big groups. I mean, I guess two of those have to do with size, but are all those wrong? Are those wrong? Like, should people change their viewpoint on that? If you're a PT listening,
the size, yes and no, and this is how I would answer that is when you're pursuing these contracts with employers, right? you have to have the clinic density and geographic coverage to be able to service the people that are
I see
employed
what you
by them.
mean. Got it. So where you are and then where the organization is located is not actually where the people live, because they might also got it. So I'm understanding that. Got it.
Yes. Yeah. So that can be a problem. And like we, at Second Door, like I've talked to single location practices that were like, hey, I want to do this direct to employer thing. Like, let's get it going. And I'm like, I want you to do it too. But you have one practice and there's 200 employees at this one employer. They probably have 500 covered lives. You on your own can't service that. Right. And I think that's where I think for so long, because, I would say just, my humble opinion, I think in physical therapy, we've operated out of a like scarcity mindset for a long time. And like the practice across my street, that's my competitor. I've got to beat them for referrals. I've got to, right. And I understand that. And to some extent, that's been reality. But when you're looking at, okay, I can continue in the model that I'm in now, or I can partner with the other practices in my area and say, hey, let's start a network. Or like Second Door Health, like we have a network of practices that are able to opt into employer contracts. Let's band together and we can all win this contract and treat at this negotiated rate. So size can be a barrier, but I think that's where, like, as an industry, we have to be willing to come together and say, like, rising tide lifts all boats. Like, let's all benefit from this, and I want that more than I necessarily want to beat my competitor across the street.
Sure.
Right.
How about I don't know how to sell.
Yeah. So I would say most practice owners don't give themselves enough credit. If you're a business owner, you're selling, right? And I would even say clinicians sell every single day.
Sure.
You've got to sell patients on a plan of care. Someone comes in for an eval. You've got to sell them on, hey, this is what I think is going to be best. This is how we're going to address, what you presented in the eval. You're selling all the time. But I also get most practice owners don't have the time, right? They don't enjoy it, and they don't have the time to go out and sell this model to employers.
Sure.
And I think that's where, I know some larger practices, they have their own staff that goes out and sells this model. But for what we're doing at Second Door, that's what that's what we've been doing is we say, okay, we know you don't want to sell. We know that's probably not your specialty and you don't have the time. Let us go and sell for you. And then when a contract comes in, you work with us through the negotiation process, right? When a contract comes in, you treat at the negotiated rate. And I think that's where, if anyone's ever seen anything I've posted on LinkedIn, like the work that Second Door is doing as a company, I think is really important to the future of the industry, because I don't know of many other organizations that are going out there and selling that model. I know that there's some like MSOs,
right.
Some of those types of organizations that are trying to do some of that. The hard part is now you're getting into understanding how all of this crazy insurance works, right? Like if I go to a self-insured employer, do I need prior auth? Do I not? Am I under direct access laws? Am I not under direct access laws? Yes, it gets convoluted. I will say the answers to that are pretty simple. When a self-insured employer creates their plan, they get to dictate that. So if you go to an employer and you say, hey, we can save you $2,700 per claim if you get your people into PT first, they can say, okay, we don't want prior auth. We just want our people to go. They can set that up because they're not dictated by what insurance says. Sure. They make their decisions for their own plan.
If a clinic owner is listening right now, more often than not, they're like, okay, I'm nodding, but I might feel stuck or there's a barrier. What's one practical first move you can give them to make this quarter? Something that checks something off the box, but does move the ball forward.
Yeah, I would say the first thing I would encourage practice owners to do is sit down and make a list or a spreadsheet and think about all of the connections that you have in your area, that your staff has in the area, right? You may have treated a COO at a local company, right? you may have treated someone who oversees the benefits of a self-insured employer in your area. Start with that list and look at, who do I know? What connections do I have? And the reason I say start there is because it's like, how do you eat an elephant? Like one bite at a time,
Sure.
right? So like start there and see like, oh, well, actually I have just myself, I have 20 connections between business networking groups and other connections in the area. My staff maybe even has more. There's real potential for this. And then I would say reach out to someone like Second Door Health, who is already has walked through that selling process, who is doing that selling process right now. The people there, Scott Hebert, Ryan Klepps, like their heart is for the industry as well. They love clinicians, they love practices, they want to see the industry succeed. And they have a ton of free resources online as well that you can go and download or even listen to their blogs, just to be able to see, okay, is this something that's feasible for me? And if it isn't, there are ways that there are other ways that you can pursue to make that possible, whether it be through someone like Second Door, who's providing a network where you can band together and treat those types of, contracts with employers, or whether that's joining an MSO if you're not a part of, an MSO or an IPA, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's, but I would say first and foremost, start with, who do I know, and see that there's actually, like, it's probably easier than you think it is.
Sure. Okay. Looking towards the future, there's got to be pain. If there's no pain, people don't move. What happens if independent clinics don't evolve? I mean, what are the stakes besides just straight up going out of business? I mean,
yeah. In my opinion, and I would say, as someone who does not claim to be an expert on this matter, I've never owned a clinic, right? I probably never will, although I would love to potentially own one in the future. I think that, in my hypothesis, and just in my opinion, I would say in 5 years, it's going to be very, very hard for the majority of private outpatient practices to continue to operate.
Wow,
Those who
yeah.
who are already at scale, I think that they may be able to continue. But with where cost is going, where reimbursement is, and we're reaching this point where, like, even if we get a 3% increase in reimbursement, what did inflation do this year?
Killed it.
Like, yeah, I mean, inflation increased more than 3%. So like, you're still getting paid less, right?
Right.
And so my fear and my concern, and why I'm passionate about this type of model for physical therapy practices, is I want practice owners to have the freedom to treat how they want to treat. If they want to start a practice and scale to 20 locations, I want them to have the ability to do that. If they want to start one single location, or maybe just treat out of a gym, I want them to be able to do that as well. I think the problem with the fee for service model at the moment is all of those things: who you treat, how you get paid, when you get paid. It's in somebody else's hands,
Yeah.
right? And so going direct to employer is hard, and it's scary because it's new. But what's the alternative?
Sure.
Keep waiting for someone else
It's not gonna
to make a
happen.
change?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter, even like the APTA, all of the great work that they do for lobbying, right? You're going up against, is the APTA putting more money into lobbying than pharmaceuticals?
Not a chance.
Are they? No, right? And so, of course, pharmaceuticals are going to push for GLP-1s, and we'll probably, see subsidies for people to get GLP-1s way before we see any kind of subsidy for payment in physical therapy, right? And so we can continue to wait and see who, is something actually going to change, or we can pave our own path. And I believe the path is there, because employers can't continue to pay these
Agreed.
outrageous costs of healthcare.
Agreed. All right. Last thing we do on each episode is called the parting shot.
This is the parting shot. One last mic drop moment. No pressure, just your legacy on the line.
All right, big thanks to Sarah Health, the remote care platform helping clinics boost revenue, which is good without adding staff. Sarah automates daily patient check-ins via text. No app, no logins, just better outcomes. Simple way to meet those RTM requirements, improve follow-through, and actually get reimbursed for the care between visits. Easy to set up, simple to use, and patients love it. SarahHealth.com. That's SARA health.com. All right, parting shot, Matt. What do you got for me?
Change the model. The model has to change. If physical therapy wants to continue to be successful and to grow, not just survive, we've got to change the model.
Love it. All right, find him on LinkedIn. I'll give you the link in the show notes. Matthew Pratte, appreciate your time, man.
Appreciate it, Jimmy. Thank you.
That's it for this one, but we're just getting warmed up. Smash follow, send it to a friend, or crank up the next episode. Want to go deeper? Hit us at pgpintcast.com. Or find us on YouTube and socials at pgpintcast. And legally, none of this was advice. It's for entertainment purposes only. See, Keith, we read the script.